Welcome to Rune Reflections. I'm not entirely sure what this podcast is going to be yet, and honestly, that's kind of the point. This is really a show I'm making because I expect it. I don't expect a million listeners. I'm not even sure that I'm making something that's going to have a grand message in the world. I'm making it because I want a record. A record of where I was, what I was thinking about, and what's happening in my life. And maybe one day, if my memory starts failing me or God forbid I have kids that want to know what I was like, I have that record to share with them. And I'll have something back to look back on. Think of this as a journal, just one that happens to have a microphone attached to it. This week felt like a week of starting over. At work, Monday and Tuesday were my last days on a job site. I was working with a couple of great hands, Mr. David and Gideon, and we'd been there a little while. At the end of it, I ended up needing to go to the doctor and took a couple of days off on doctor's orders, which honestly ended up being a blessing because the next job site I was at, let me get to that later. It ended up being a blessing because Memphis decided to remind everybody that summer is coming and what it would be. It was 90 degrees plus before heat indexing, with humidity so thick it made you felt like you were breathing through a wet towel. I often joke that it's not the people in Memphis that'll mug you, it's the weather. I started at this new site, and somehow it was even hotter. You know how some places have shade, fans, air movement, a breeze, something. Not this place. I seemed determined to answer the question of how uncomfortable a human being can be while still technically being alive. The bright side is, I was working with a hand I'd worked with before, and his name is, let's call him Ben. He's a good person. And, I met up, I started working with him, heard great news from him about some stuff he'd been going through with, family. And like it was all coming to an end and like it was exciting and good. We started working and he's one of those guys that you don't mind being miserable with. Good attitude, good workers make jobs tolerable. And outside of work, I spent a couple of days driving Lyft. The funny thing is I was genuinely enjoying it. Most people think the appeal for something like that's money. And sure, money matters. But the real appeal here is hearing people's stories. For 10 minutes at a time, somebody gets into your car and lets you peek into their life. You'll hear the stories from a little old lady talking about how great her grandkids are and what they're going to do and how much they're going to achieve. You'll hear the woman that apparently just got cheated on and talk about that man ain't shit and all that. I mean, there's everything. Sometimes they're celebrating, sometimes they're heartbroken. A lot of times they're drunk. When they're heading to a job interview is always great because they'll be excited about the future, the possibilities, and like moving up in life where like you can see hope in their eyes, and that's always amazing. And sometimes, a lot of times, they're just trying to get home. It's been a long day at the office or at the job, and they're just tired and want to go home. They'll pass out in the back seat, and I'll have to wake them up. It's happened plenty of times. But you never really know. I think that's why I'm going to lean into that for content on TikTok for a while. I'm going to talk about the stories of people, changing their names to protect the innocent. The old spill for Matlock. But I'm going to talk about the stories I get from Lyft. I'm going to do that between rides, and I think it'll be fun. It's a good place to put it. All my art and podcast, all the podcasts I'm going to be doing, and all that stuff, it takes time and planning. The Lyft is immediate stories, and I need to get them out as quick as I can remember them. Speaking of stories, I had a pretty interesting, let's call it a date with, let's call her Tinkerbell. I'm calling her Tinkerbell because I've been accused multiple times of trying to be Peter Pan and never growing up. So we'll just call the dates Tinkerbell. And I'm going to call her Tink for short. Decided to bring one of her friends. Now, normally this would be weird enough, but we all ended up going to an EDM show, which is a good place to have a small group. And it was a great vibe. Good people, great music. Got to see an old friend that I hadn't seen in 3 years perform. He'd moved across another state and like 6, 7 hours away, so he's in town doing a show. I was fucking stoked. Fucking gave him the biggest fucking hug, man. It felt so good to see my buddy Losha. But we had a problem. And the problem, I don't think either of them fully knows what they were walking into. Now, EDM has its own type of people, and like these girls were not EDM people. Or, I wouldn't assume they would be. And there are certain events where, within 5 minutes, whether someone feels comfortable or not. One of the girls was more uncomfortable than the other. It was fun, and honestly, we spent enough time sitting at home over the few months, and getting out and having weird experiences feels healthy. Another thing that happened this week was a vending opportunity came up for the clubhouse event at Wiseacre Brewing in downtown Memphis. And now Tink is actually going to come help me work the booth, and that feels like it's a pretty significant change for me. Not because I can't physically run the booth by myself. Like, I'll be running the booth and the door. That's kind of something I do with these guys. And I've done that plenty of times. And the thing that feels significant is because I've never had somebody wanting to help me succeed and, like, run my money up. And get in the trenches and, like, help build it up. Maybe I overpaid for some help, but maybe it's not the best business decision, but I gotta grow. And growth requires some risk. You can't do things that feel comfortable and expect to be a millionaire. I spent years trying to do everything alone. And honestly, it's more exhausting and I get less done. Maybe it's time to see what happens when I have a little bit of help. When I wasn't working, driving, going on dates, or planning events, I managed to catch up on some anime. I've been I've been really far behind on that time I got reincarnated as a slime, and I was an arc or so behind in JJK. I'm loving the development of Rimuru and reincarnated as slime, and Jujutsu Kaisen is kind of like just a normal dark shonen, I guess. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch all of it when they start getting some real shit going on again. But I understand the fanfare on both of them, and reincarnated as slime is probably one of the very few isekais I actually like. I've also caught up on most of the podcasts I normally listen to. And somewhere in there, I started replaying Fallout 4. I mean, it's a little funny. That game is still one of. It's fantastic. But something feels different. I remember losing entire weeks to games when I was younger. Now I play for an hour and my brain starts thinking about everything else I want to get done. Unfinished projects, business plans, art ideas, podcasts I want to make, bills, the adult stuff. The game didn't change. I changed. And maybe that's okay. One thing that surprised me this week is that I actually enjoyed going out drinking for the first time in a long time. And maybe it was the more the company than the drinks, but I don't know. Maybe it was I was drinking tequila and not whiskey. Like I felt relaxed, I was at ease, and I hadn't felt that way in a long time. I don't know if that's personal growth or an impending warning sign. We'll find out. The biggest thing that happened this week, though, was deciding to finally start this podcast. I've been talking about doing podcasts for a while. Part of it is practical. I want to get comfortable on the technical side of podcasting before I launch my interview show next year. I also want to create a storytelling podcast in the future based on my Memphis universe. These goals may be ambitious. They might be downright unrealistic for me. But every project starts as a ridiculous idea before it becomes a real thing. The other reason is more personal. A friend told me about memory therapies to help people with cognitive decline. It got me thinking, what if one day I can't remember my moments? What if one day I can't remember who I was? I never took photos. Maybe these recordings become my time capsule. Maybe they become my way back to reality when there's nothing else. It might be nothing, but I like the idea of having it as insurance. My family was on my mind too. My dad had a surgery, not the same day. But, it still makes you worried. Everybody in the family was worried, especially mom, which I can really understand as she spent almost 4 decades, being there with this man. He's been good through her whole life, pretty much. But my dad came through it and acted like he scraped his fucking knee. He's one of the toughest and most stubborn old men I've ever fucking met. And sometimes seeing your parents get older reminds you how much you still admire them. On a more complicated note, though, in a couple of months being removed from my fiance leaving me, it's just, it's still weird. I mean, ultimately, it felt like her depression is what pulled us apart, that and her finances. I've started getting out more, though. I've started meeting people. I've started saying yes to things again. Trust is still difficult. I was planning a life with someone, and it's just hard. I think that's normal. I think that if you were building something with someone and it all fell apart, you do become less willing to try and build with other people. When something important breaks, you can't immediately stop checking for cracks. You got to make sure that you have repaired yourself. You move slower, you become cautious, and you look for signs. And I think that's where I am right now. I'll go on a couple of dates, I'll enjoy it, but still being cautious. Learning how to participate in life again without pretending nothing happened. The last thing on my mind this week is the news. Not getting political, but the continued conflict involving Iran has been hanging over everything. Gas prices are still stupidly high. Everything in the stores are going up because gas prices are stupidly high. And it feels like every week we're told it's almost over, and it isn't. Selfishly, I just want some type of stability so the markets can correct and I can hope that my retirement fund will stay a retirement fund. I want the markets to calm down. I want people to stop dying. I think a lot of people are exhausted by the constant feeling that another major headline is right around the corner. Another once in a lifetime event is coming for us. And as a millennial guy, I'm tired of once in a lifetime events. I think I've been through even 40. Maybe the other reason I wanted to start this podcast is that the world feels chaotic. Life feels chaotic. And sitting down once a week to talk through things, what's happening, and feels like is a way that makes sense of it without paying a therapist at $500 a week. Or, well, at least keep track of the chaos. So, let's call this week one. We have a new job site, a new podcast, and a date that was interesting. A new business risk, a few old hobbies, a lot of uncertainty. And maybe that's what this chapter of life is. Not having the answers, just being willing to begin again. I'll talk to you next week.